Okay, so today this is our agenda. So I'm going to go over the workshop series framework. I'm going to go over a few references. I have a primer. It's the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster clip. Really, it's a reenactment of when the decision was made the day prior to launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger, and then review the creation of culture of success, which is basically the leadership piece. I'm not going to go over all that like I did last week, but I'm just going to basically just give a refresher. And then we're going to, Dr. Curiel, she's our distinguished guest today. She's going to be speaking for about 15 minutes on leadership. And we're going to get into the planning process deep dive. And then we're going to get to the key takeaways, and then we'll get to questions and discussion at the end. Okay, so here's the overall workshop framework. Those of you that were here last week, we had the foundation, which is essentially the leadership was the big primer and the foundation for the rest of my workshop. And then I just did a quick overview of planning, a quick overview of project management. So today we're in the planning session, and we're going to just do the leadership primer like I talked about, an intro to a planning process. This planning process does not exist anywhere. Planning process is something that I created, and just I've had 2 jobs in the civilian sector, and I derived this planning process from my time in the Marine Corps, and you'll see the way it plays out. And the idea is that this is to be tailored for you and wherever you are and how you're going to plan your projects. Maybe you're writing a proposal, all those kind of things. Then we'll get into a summary, like I said, and then get the key takeaways. Okay, real quick for the project management piece, this will flow after, and then hopefully I'll be able to tie it all together at the end of how all these 3 workshops come together and why they build on each other. Here's some of the references I used. So this is a project management body of knowledge. So essentially this is the Bible, if you will, of all things project management. The Project Management Institute also has a process groups and practice guide, and they have a bunch of resources. So I am a paid member of PMI, of the Project Management Institute, so I have all those resources at my disposal, but really that means at your disposal. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I use war fighting from the Marine Corps, my time that I served. This is a foundational doctrinal publication, and really the way I look at that is it's a philosophy, the way you think about leadership and the way you think about, in this case, war fighting. And I know it doesn't necessarily apply here in those terms per se, but there's a lot of things that I was able to extract because they do apply right here where you are. And then the Marine Corps planning process, something I've been exposed to, like I said, for virtually my entire career of over 28 years. And then another doctrinal publication that we use is for planning. And I think it's a very, very solid resource for us. So here's going to be the primer, which is the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster video. I have a couple. The first one's going to be just under 7 minutes. The other one's just going to be shy of 2 minutes, and then we'll continue on.
The tragedy of the Challenger and many other catastrophic events can be traced in part to the group decision-making process that leads to them. Among the causes of faulty group decisions, few have received more attention or study than in groupthink. Simply stated, groupthink is a mode of thinking in which group members' premature striving for agreement somehow overrides their ability to realistically appraise alternative courses of action. In the early 70s, renowned psychologist Dr. Irving Janis first identified groupthink and theorized it could be brought on by something he called group cohesiveness.
Well, basically, a cohesive group is one whose members are very positive in their feeling toward the group and are very strongly motivated to retain their membership in the group. One of the consequences of high cohesiveness is a tendency for the members of the group to strive toward agreement. And this is a concurrence-seeking tendency that is at the core of groupthink.
Since Dr. Janis first developed the groupthink hypothesis, psychologists have discovered a number of additional factors that can predispose group members to engage in groupthink. A highly insulated group with restrained access to outside ideas, a stressful decision-making context, such as that brought on by budgetary restraints, external pressure, or a history of recent setbacks.
I think everybody's hooked up.
Arnie Thompson and Roger Poinchelet have been doing the research. They'll make the presentation.
The Air Force estimates 29 degrees at launch tomorrow morning.
We have no data on O-rings operating at temperatures this low.
So determining if this extreme cold will affect the O-rings, and if it does, how much is critical.
So our recommendation is, you should see it on the sheet coming through now, not launching until the temperature is at least 53 degrees.
Whoa. Oh. Wait a minute. Am I looking at the right charts? Charts I've got don't support that conclusion.
They do. I think they do.
Well, you began by saying what you're presenting can't be proved. And I agree, it can't. But now you're drawing serious conclusions from it, and you're making very serious recommendations.
Serious recommendations are called for.
Well, of course, that's why we're here. But what you're saying sounds like Morton Thiokol is establishing new launch commit criteria the night before a launch. Now, these solid rocket boosters have been operating under very definite specifications. You suddenly want to change them. You now want to base everything on this 53-degree benchmark. At that rate, it could be spring before the shuttle would fly. My God, Thiokol, when do you want me to launch? Next April?
I don't think we want to change launch commit criteria. We're trying to see if it's safe to launch with the O-rings experiencing these severe temperatures.
All I'm saying is that launching it below freezing is an act away from goodness. All I'm saying is we should go by our experience base, as limited as that is. And our experience base says that at 53 degrees or less, we can expect increased erosion and blow-by.
Roger, it's my understanding that the solid rocket boosters are qualified by contract for operation between 40 and 90 degrees. This 53-degree specification would be setting a new benchmark. Are the solids qualified at 40 degrees or aren't they?
It's away from goodness to make any other recommendation.
Listen, if being in the direction of goodness means wanting a successful result for this mission, I want that result. Everybody involved in this telecon wants it. Be reassured, Roger, you are not in the direction of goodness by yourself. But we've got an engineering decision to make here. And it's got to be made on quantifiable data. Now, I want to ask Joe Kilminster for his recommendation.
Based on this presentation by our engineers here at Morton Thiokol, I can't recommend a launch.
I think we should get George Hardy's comments.
Well, let me ask first, does Thiokol have any more to transmit?
Any further views?
Because if not, I'm appalled that they could arrive at the recommendation not to launch, given the data that's been presented, especially so late on the evening before a launch. I agree with Larry Malloy. I make the same assessment he does. But if Thiokol recommends not launching, I'm certainly not going to override it.
We'd like to go offline for 5 minutes here and have a conference.
All right.
I want to make sure I've got this. The worry is the temperatures in the 20s or 30s could cause the primary O-ring to seal more slowly. If it did, we could get some blow-by.
That's right.
But don't we have some tests that show how the O-rings
We have
behave?
tests showing that even if the blow-by cut 125 thousandths of an inch out of the O-ring, it would still seal.
I'll tell you, it makes an impression on me if George Hardy says he's appalled at something we recommend.
This is Joe Kilminster. We've assessed the data and reviewed all our charts. Even though we had some concerns about the low temperatures, we now recommend proceeding with the launch.
Does anyone in the loop have a different position?
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3. And liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles.
Challenger, go at throttle up.
Roger, go at throttle up. Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
So as we know, we lost these 7 astronauts, 7 American sons and daughters to this tragedy. So in this case, that decision and those decisions that were being made inside that boardroom cost their lives. But really, what I want to get to when we get into the planning piece, hitting on the leadership and understanding the climate that was set by NASA and all these folks that were in that boardroom, I think led to the tragedy. And we could sit here and we could read all the books and all that good stuff, but I just think from a high level, you're looking at it, it's about the climate. And so with that said, it's about that creating a culture of success. How do we do it? And so in the last session, I went through a bunch of other stuff, but what I'm going to just focus in on here are the challenges of leadership. So right here, you have Denali reflecting off of Wonder Lake in Alaska. Looks beautiful from afar, right? And like I said before, when you're in leadership positions and when you're looking at Denali from afar, they look good. Then once you get into that rough terrain right there, it becomes very challenging. If you don't have the right equipment, if you're not properly prepared, all those kind of things. So with that said, when you're in leadership positions, you're going to have conflict management within your own organizations, with peers, with other employees, maybe with higher headquarters, in this case, upper executive leadership. You're going to have biases. We've talked about the biases, talking about Malcolm Gladwell, where he puts you, that particular book, Blink, where it puts you through some of those exercises to be able to identify the biases that you may have. And then that professional insecurity piece. For professional insecurity, what I look at there is being able to have that humility, to be able to listen to others' ideas. As we know, humility is opposite of arrogance, those kind of things. And when you are not maybe comfortable in your own skin, you may be employing some of these kind of things that impact your people directly, that you're in charge and entrusted to lead. Some of the things I've talked about at the last session was emotional intelligence, making sure that you have empathy, making sure you understand you're trying to build trust within the team. You're trying to build a cohesive team working towards common goals. And being engaged and being involved, understanding where people are. We always talk about meet people where you are. I know Nirav always talks about that, right? Meeting people where they are and research, things of that nature. Well, same thing with leadership. Be engaged, be involved, know where your people are, understand all the things that they may, the challenges that they may be facing. And then leading people, managing things mentality. So that to me is is key because of the fact that when you manage a timeline, you manage things, you may manage critical milestones, things of that nature, but you have to lead the people to make sure that they're accomplishing those milestones. And so I'm going to build on something here that I built on at the last session, right? So the three things that I look at that we expect from leaders is that they provide guidance, they manage risk, and they make decisions. And in doing so, there's two lanes. And this first lane I'm putting up here is leadership, right? It's that leadership lane. When they communicate, they're providing guidance to the organization. When they're teaching, they're making sure that you're properly trained and that you're getting the proper mentorship. And the idea is that they want to make sure that you understand where you are, how you're performing. So they give you that performance evaluation, or maybe it's a career discussion. And then the expectation is that it's implicit execution. And from a direct report perspective, when they're communicating to you and they're providing that guidance, you're just trying to understand. And when they're teaching, you're going through trainings and you're getting mentored, you're just trying to learn and you're just trying to apply. So that way, when you get that performance feedback, you understand exactly your overall performance, what are the things you need to sustain and what are the things you need to improve. And then for expectation, perform the standard. I mean, at the end of the day, every direct report just wants to perform the standard. And right here is where I see execution of duties, where you're getting training, you're getting mentorship, you're getting those conversations in the hallway, maybe in an office space, and then you're just getting constant feedback on your performance. But those 4 types of friction we talked about with self-induced, external, physical, and mental at the last session, they're always at bay. They're always entering, right? Self-induced friction, right? And external. Well, external in this case was the temperature. In this case was weather. You can't control that. But you as a leader can control the response. So in this case, that external, those are those things I talked about last week. You can't control those things, but you as a leader need to understand that you are entrusted to make and responsible to make those decisions and respond to those things that are external and applied to a solution. So I've talked about humility, authenticity, and having that positive mental attitude. And those are those things that will help an organization and you as a leader to be able to deal with these 2 lanes, deal with these 4 types of frictions within your organization, and then ultimately being able to create that culture of success within your organization. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up our distinguished guest, Dr. Curiel, and I'm going to read her bio. So Dr. Curiel's role as a member of the UACC, so University of Arizona Cancer Center, is to establish and foster research activities related to the skin cancer field across multiple disciplines. She is currently the co-director of the Skin Cancer Institute and director of the Cutaneous Oncology Program. She has served as a lead dermatologist in 7 clinical studies and as a PI in 7 clinical trials through the PO1 Skin Cancer Chemo Prevention Grant, the UA NCI DCP Cancer Chemo Prevention Consortium Agreement, and sponsored studies. She has been instrumental in establishing research collaborations between the UA Cancer Center and the College of Optical Sciences, Bioengineering, and the Department of Radiology to evaluate novel imaging modalities in the skin cancer arena. Her cancer focus to date has been her research interest has focused in photobiology, early skin cancer detection, and primary prevention. So without further ado, I welcome Dr. Curiel.
Can you hear me online? Oh, perfect. So I was saying that I had the opportunity to work with Rudy on a particular project, and that required individuals with multiple expertise to communicate together and tackle a specific objective that we had. And that's how I had the opportunity to work with him. And after all this 1.5 years working together, we thought it was a good idea to come and talk to you. So when you think about leadership, it sounds like a big title, big tasks that we're supposed to learn and master well. And one of the first steps in leadership is trying to understand who you are. Because your leadership style will depend on a set of values and principles and code of conduct that you have. So you have to have a lot of self-awareness. And before you can lead other people, you need to understand how you lead yourself. So that's something that is really important. With this regard, we think we're doing a leadership style. But it's not always the case. So you probably have in some of these books and some of the presentation from Rudy, I don't know if he's going through the different leadership styles, and it would be good that you search that even by Google and see which one resonates with you. Because once you identify the leadership style, then you know exactly what you're doing and how you're projecting yourself to others. The other aspect of leadership, for example, I know that for me, I consider myself more of a pace setter and sympathetic, who is goal-oriented. And when you get that line for yourself, you repeat it, and then you know, this really reflects how I tend to do things. And then the feedback comes into place. The other aspect of leadership that is important to know is, when are you leading? Not all leadership styles are the best leadership for the circumstances you're in. And it's important that you recognize that, because if you are someone who is very good leading in a time of growth with minimal adversity, but then you're in a situation of crisis, and that's not what you're strong at, you need to know that. Not necessarily that you have to step away from being a leader, but to recognize that your skill sets and the usual style is not the best fit for that situation, and then allows you to compensate for it. You either seek help from somebody else, you learn a new skill, but it goes back to the point of that self-awareness and knowing when and how to lead. With respect to the project that I worked with Rudy and with Nirav on, they wanted to specifically talk for me to relate to you, how do you approach yourself as a leader in the setting of a specific project? Which sometimes happen, right? So we're going to work on this research project, you have these tasks, and now you're supposed to lead. The first step is really understand if there is clarity on what the project is all about. You need to know, what are they asking you to do? You know, what exactly is it that you're hoping to accomplish? And importantly, important is the outcome and the impact of it. Because once you know what is it that you're trying to get at the end of the day, but importantly, what is the difference that that project is going to make, you can bring that information back to the table and your team that you're building, and they have clarity and alignment. And clarity and alignment in a project can be what will make you succeed or what will make you fail. Then once you have that information, and if you don't have all the information that you need to outsource. Before you engage a team, don't engage a team necessarily before you have that step sorted out. Talk to your supervisor. Supervisor maybe knows what the objective is, but doesn't know how to get there. Then this is when you go in and engage other people with expertise. Create your mini advisory team for whatever you're going to do. Hey, do you know about this? What are the things that I should be thinking about? And once you have gathered that information, you will be empowering yourself to engage a team. And then you can bring the team. Sometimes you have control of the team. Sometimes you have control of who's coming with the team. So you have control of the team, then you can decide who are you going to invite to the table, because then you know the expertise that is going to be needed to manage that particular project, because now you have clarity on what it's all about. If you can manage a team and you're supposed to work with that team to get to the final objective, get to know your team members and be very, very honest about where their strengths are, their expertise, but also what they don't do so well. Because the last thing you want to do is ask individuals that do not have the capability of delivering on certain tasks to do something. It generates frustration. It will bring the team down, it will create a bad dynamic, but again, it goes back to your point as a leader, you're supposed to know who to ask for what. So once you have that in place and you bring everybody to the table, bringing it in a way that everyone feels that they're part of the solution. It's very hard to have teams engage when all what they think is about tasks. Task and task and task. Come to work is a task. But you bring that initial point of impact to every time, every day that you meet, and you say, we're doing this, for example, because we're going to diagnose skin cancer early, and we can save lives by diagnosing skin cancer early. And this is why we're here today, because we think this single step that we're working towards is going to make a difference. The engagement that you have in your team when there is a purpose, a greater purpose, not just the pragmatic purpose, is very good, very good. So that's the aspect about having clarity and getting your team members to execute functions that they're good at. The other aspect of this is empower them to be their own leaders in those specific areas. It's amazing when you work with individuals and they feel good about what they're doing and they know they're contributing, but they feel a little bit more in control. This is really powerful and really creates an atmosphere where everyone wants to do more, everyone wants to learn more, and it's a different culture. That's where the culture then really shifts, is when you have full engagement of your team and everyone feels that is part of the solution. So those are just examples of when you're working a team, that you might recognize. If you're in a team and then you can say, well, my leader is quite not doing it this way. I'm not feeling this way. Part of your leadership is to step up and have that conversation, actually. You don't have to be leading a team to be a leader. You can be a leader within your own function, and part of that is maybe change the dynamic or contribute in any other way and let whoever is the leader of that or greater team know that you feel in a certain way, that you believe there's other ways of doing it. Something that is very, I think, steals the thunder from team members is when the leader walks into a room and says, okay, this is the problem that we're going to fix, and this is what I think about it. The moment a leader says what they're thinking about, the conversation is almost over, right? Because very few people are going to go and be opposed to what is being suggested already. So, okay, that person already knows what he's supposed to do, so what we deal with. So the best part is to walk in a room and say, we have this issue, but this team is amazing at solving problems, and I'm sure all of you have a different expertise and ways to contribute to the solution. Why don't we go around the table and see what everyone thinks about this? When you're there, you're going to be the last one speaking. And you will be have the benefit of everyone's input, and couldn't get much better. So these are aspects when leader and team are so valuable. And they take time. You need to cultivate them. And it's a constant learning. Leadership is a journey. It's not just a task. It's stretching, getting out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you want to do things repetitively because it feels comfortable, it feels good. But there is very little learning in repetitive action. If you want to stretch, I really don't know how to do that well. Let me do a little bit of it today. Or if you're not the kind of person who likes to speak up, maybe one day to speak up. And then that starts feeling a little bit better. Show your opinion, and you do it more often. And that is the way how leadership skills can truly be built. So these are some of these thoughts that I had. And I think right now, when we think where the University of Arizona is going through, as you all know, we have a major financial crisis. We don't really know what it means in many ways, but also think that moments of uncertainty and crisis is also a moment of opportunity. It's a moment of opportunity to build leadership skills. If it's something that is needed in crisis, it's leadership. So look at what we're going through right now, not as something that you necessarily have full control, and that sometimes can feel scary. But look at it from the entire opposite side. And that's what leaders will tend to do. And you are all leaders in your own way. Is, you know what can I take charge of this? What is it that I can control? What is it that I can do myself to improve and contribute to this process and better yourself in all of this? So it's a process of it. It's an object that you have in life too. Of not dragging things down, of lifting things up. And that will impact, and I will tell you that's probably one of the most important parts too, is in order to do this in your daily life at work, even your personal life gets better. Because without noticing it, you're also handling your friends, your family with a different attitude of empowerment and empowering everyone around you, whether it's your co-worker or if your family member. It really has that tremendous, and then becomes something that is consistent on who you act, how you behave, how you communicate, how you lead, how you lift up others, and carry you through life, no matter where you are and what you're doing. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
You know, if I'm not the one in charge, and I recognize that I'm not the one in charge, and so I give the advice that I think is appropriate, then, you know, at what point do I just accept, okay, they decided to disregard what I said?
So there is two parts to that. How you feel personally about it, and the impact that it has on the project too, right? So there's two things that go there. One piece is in the role that you're in, you have a responsibility to bring accuracy and rigor, you know, to whatever project you're into. And it's important to reflect that as well. And when you're engaging with an investigator, sometimes setting up those expectations from day one with whoever you're engaging with may be something that could potentially help you and give you a little bit more control, but again, clarity, alignment. From the very, it takes a little bit of homework from the beginning, but then it smooths the ride. So you can say to your investigators, listen, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is what I think I can do really well. And this is what I don't think I operate well. In order to get this project executed effectively, how about we work on it with this structure? So what do you think? You don't want to impose, but you invite people to that way of operating and engaging. You're being a leader right there by setting directions and terms, and then work through that. If it gets you well, say, hey, maybe we need to regroup here a little bit in a good way. Everyone has it. We have the same purpose. I feel this way. How about in humility? I think vulnerability is so important too in all of this. No one is trying to be right. We're trying to do the best possible for the project and not polarizing. And that's what people always sometimes default to. You want to be right. It's not about right. And hopefully through those conversations, you can work with your PIs and then you create a culture. Then you change the culture of the way how people interact with you moving forward.
Just seems like some investigators just so naturally, you know, and then others, yeah, it's, you know, some investigators just so naturally and instinctively share the big picture and, you know, teach me something about immunology and the process. And I love, you know, I love learning about the subject matter. And some of them just so naturally do that. And then others, you know.
And there is the opportunity of you to give them a gift for those that do not, because they might not even know that they're not doing it. But if you don't point it out to them, they will never know.
A comment. I think this is a very important discussion because a lot of people grapple with it, but they don't speak about it. And Clara rightly pointed out that it's a culture. And if you haven't traveled overseas and if your world is small, the first time you go out, it's a culture shock. But then you bring back some good ideas from that and you enrich your own. And so, having been in academia for 30 years and lived through some of these experiences, if you treat the first interaction with the person as what it's going to be the same for the rest of your life with that person, that usually is not a good mindset. But if you are willing to morph along with them, because everybody has their own learning journey, and they get either cues from the body of work, where if you present yourself, and I'm just using you as an example, and you solve a problem for them, but the way you come across as a leader, and leader doesn't mean you're firm and you're like, I won't do this, or this is my way or highway, but you navigate them to where they are, and then you point out some of the benefits. The next time they come, the interaction becomes different. It's small steps. And the investigators that you enjoy being with, I can guarantee you they met someone like you along the way who brought them into that. So if you come from a lab where that lab culture was that, it just percolates and then it's embodied in their DNA and it keeps working wherever they go. And so all I can say is, please don't lower your standards because you met someone that I don't have time to talk to you, just do this and make sure that it's done right. You cannot sometimes help that, but the next person that comes to you, don't assume that they are the same person, even if they came from the same labs. That's all I would request to you. But as Clara said, it's a culture and play your small part, take them to a different country, let them enjoy that and come back.
Thank you, Rob.
We have to move on, but this is great. Dr. Curiel, muchas gracias. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome.
Okay, team, we're gonna continue on. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So I want to get into the planning process deep dive. I'll tell you right now, we're at 15 minutes before we get to time. I'm not gonna rush. What's gonna happen is we're gonna come to time. I'm gonna stop at 2 p.m. because I'm very cognizant of your time. And next week we'll continue where we left off. And then what I'll do is I'll push out the project management 1 week out, and I'll do it on the 28th because I really do believe I want to get through this planning process, and I want to do the deep dive, and I want to make sure that we do it right, and I don't want to rush it. But the conversation that we were just having is precisely the ingredient that we need for effective planning. So that's why I allowed that conversation to go, because it's absolutely important. And for team members to feel like that, that's precisely what I was getting after. Because when we get into the planning process, that's what we're doing. We're leveraging everybody's expertise in the room. That's why they're there. So planning as a definition, right? So this is right out of the project management body of knowledge. Planning are those processes required to establish the scope of the project, refine the objectives, and define course of action required to attain the objectives that the project has undertaken to achieve. I look at it as understanding before doing. Why plan is important. So right out of that publication I talked about, Marine Corps Doctrine Publication 5, which is planning, it calls it a preparation process. And I think once I go through this process with you, you're going to understand that, yep, it's exactly what it is. And Sun Tzu, I love this one because he says, planning is that by which harm is avoided and advantage gained. And I love that because the idea is if you're thinking before doing, then you know that you're going to be able to identify roadblocks before you get to them while you're in execution. And that's the idea, is to make sure that, yes, uncertainty is going to be there. Yes, there's going to be roadblocks, but you don't want to have that uncertainty grow just because you didn't do proper planning. And again, everybody knows that poor planning is often cited as a cause of unsuccessful or failed projects, period. So as a planning philosophy, so leadership-driven planning. So it's, again, leadership is driving the process, is helping drive the process, and they're the ones that understand that planning is absolutely important. And so when I look at the planning piece, if the leader isn't saying or putting any emphasis that planning is important, the team is not going to plan, period. And they're going to do something that looks like a bunch of discussions and we put something together. The one team concept, you're going to be bringing folks, they come cross-functional teams, and they're going to be probably coming from different organizations. And in some cases, they're not going to be your direct reports. So you're not going to have any quote unquote authority over these people. You're going to have to influence them, help them, help you is essentially how I look at it, and that they're part of the team. And that one team concept helps that. Integrated planning. It's bringing the right people for the right, problem set that you have at the table at the right time to then come together with all the varying different, the way I look at it is everybody has their angle, their perspective of looking at a specific problem. Well, with that said, you need everybody in the room that you brought there for a reason, because they have some kind of expertise, they have some kind of technical knowledge, whatever it may be. And that integrated planning is extremely important. If you have these three concepts in play, then I feel that you're already on the road to a successful project. So when do we plan? So, when you look at the process groups and practice guide that PMI puts out, the Project Management Institute, from the top, what's the project life cycle, right? So loosely, up top, they have this phasing construct. You start the project, you organize and prepare, you carry out the work, that's that execution piece, then you end the project nicely, and then you're on to the next thing. Well, in the next box where it says process groups, planning processes. So the initiating process begins because either the PI comes in and says, I have this idea, but instead of trying to solve it right away, and so happy that Dr. Curiel said, like, as long as that PI doesn't say, hey, here's a solution, so go after it. The idea is that for planning, no one in the room, to include what we would say the expert in the rooms, just singularly speaking, they're not going to have everything they need to solve that problem. They need the team, and they want the team. In order to bring that team to bear on to bear on that problem, to get us to a solution, is through planning. And there's that planning process. So we're going to get into it. So this planning process, you're not going to find it written anywhere, right? You're gonna see it. Maybe the Marine Corps planning process could look familiar to this, but the idea here is this is why I'm trying to do this, is that it applies to the civilian sector, right? There's some things that we do in the military that doesn't necessarily apply here, but I want to bring in a planning process. So what is that planning process? That step one is framing session. That's where you're gathering the information, you're brainstorming to understand the problem. And we're going to get into that. Step two, solution development. This is where you're taking the idea, you're creating a concept, and I have some examples about creating that concept, get it down to functional level planning, and then into detailed planning for execution. And then you have to evaluate that problem, right? And the whole idea you're evaluating it because you have everybody in the room looking at this solution to make sure that it meets 4 criteria that I'm going to share with you. And that step has one focus, and that's to improve that plan. And then once you have that, and everybody, and at the end of the day, the leader, if it's a PI, if it's a director, whatever executive leader is in the room that has the authority to say, yes, this is it, then we're going to move into develop the written plan. And you're going to see, it says very deliberate here, where you're going to approve that detailed written plan. That's the whole purpose behind that step 4. And then you get into transition. Transition is, and you're going to see the way we make that transition. I have some recommendation on how to do it, so that way everybody's on the same page before you start executing. So here's step 1, framing session. And I warn you that this is going to be a little dense, but just bear with me, because the idea here is I'm going to step you through these 5 steps. The idea is that this takes repetition. I told you I've been planning since 1993. And believe me, I'm still don't feel like I'm the expert. I feel I'm pretty good now, but I'm not the expert. And it takes repetitions. It's just like anything else, it's practice. So for step 1, the whole purpose of this step is to achieve an understanding of the problem, period. Here's some of those key inputs into that planning process. Maybe it's a strategic plan. Maybe it's some business rules. Maybe it's regulation, policies, and procedures. Maybe it's a grant agency funding program document. Maybe it's approved or a draft proposal documentation. Maybe it's notes that a PI has in their notebook. Maybe it's email correspondence because it starts off with the idea, right? All those things matter. And then also what matters is, hey, what experience, expertise, and judgment does a PI, does a director, does the entire staff have? And there's a template for this. It's called a framing session template that I have these templates ready for you to use. So what are the team actions in this step? Well, you're going to be developing that org chart, identifying those key stakeholders. You're going to be identifying those partners and those planners, right? Who do you need to build this team? You may need somebody from an organization that is not sitting in the room with you. So during planning, you're identifying that person and get them into the planning process early. So that way they can be part of the solution. You do task analysis. What are the tasks that we need to accomplish? What are some assumptions? What are the limitations? What are those things that we can't do and we have to do? What are some requests for information? There's going to be, like right now, we started into a planning process here. Everybody in here would have at least 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe 10 questions, right, that we could probably come up with. And those are those requests for information, and it's very deliberate. And I also have that part of the template to understand how that flows. Shortfalls, obviously, if you identify, hey, we need this certain person or this expert, and we don't have them, that's identified as a shortfall. And then the team starts working to get that person in the room. Risks, risk mitigation, time constraints. Every project is going to have a timeline for the most part. And at least you're going to want to have some milestones. Develop or validate the budget. I just came off of a proposal that we're about to submit. And one of the things we had to do is validate the budget. Define the problem. What is the problem set? What is the problem statement that you see? I've been working mainly with health sciences, and they always have a problem statement, and then a proposed mission statement as well. And the whole idea here about this proposed mission statement has everything to do with the task and the purpose. Why are we doing this project? Like, why? And that is the purpose. That sets your team in motion because they actually have a goal. It's been refined. It's been well thought out. And then it gets us to our key outputs for this particular step. You're going to have an approved mission statement, right? You understand what you're trying to solve. You're going to have that framing session brief. You're going to probably have a draft budget. And one of the things that comes out of it should be, like I said, leaders do those 3 things. One of them is providing guidance, managing risk, and making decisions. Well, that leader should be providing some kind of guidance for the team for the next step, which is developing the solution. Here's a framing session brief agenda. And again, I have a template for you all to use. It's already ready to go. And these are some of the key things, everything I've talked about in there, but it's just nicely right here in an agenda format. Step 2. So right now we're at 1:58. We have 2 minutes. And really, I want to stop right here. And the reason being is because I do not want to rush this. And I really think it's absolutely important. But I think the discussion we had today about leadership was absolutely key for the future of this particular workshop. And we're going to do it again in April. So, but with that said, I want to make sure that I walk you through this particular planning process, because I think it's going to be useful, and I think it can be useful. I'm a big believer in it. So with that said, I appreciate everybody that joined. We will reconvene in 1 week. So on the 21st of February at 1 p.m. That right now it says it's the project management session. Well, I'm going to continue with the planning, and we'll get through this. And then I'll set the project management session for the 28th of February, because it just makes sense, and I just don't want to rush it. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, anything? If you do, please put it in the chat. Anybody in the room?